The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. When some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned with beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God, Jesus said, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." They asked him, "Teacher, when will this be? And what will be the sign that this is about to take place?" And Jesus said, "Beware that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and the time is near. Do not go after them. When you hear of wars and insurrections, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end will not follow immediately." Then he said to them, "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in various places famines and plagues, and there will be dreadful portents and great signs from heaven. But before all of this occurs, they will arrest you and persecute you and hand you over to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors because of my name. This will give you an opportunity to testify. So make up your minds not to prepare your defense in advance, for I will give you words and a wisdom that none of your opponents will be able to withstand or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, by brothers and sisters, by relatives and friends, and some of you will be put to death. You will be hated by all because of my name, but not a single hair of your head will perish. By your endurance you will gain your souls." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Have you ever wondered why more mathematicians aren't multi-millionaires? They're real bright guys. Personally, I don't know a single mathematician who's even a millionaire, let alone a multi-millionaire. The more genius they appear to be, the less interested they seem to be in profits, and the more interested they are in ideas. So you don't find multi-millionaire mathematicians, as far as I know. There's one exception. I'm not going to tell you who he is, but I'll tell you how he got his ill-gained fortune. He figured out that people like to bet on ball games, college sports. And so he set up a website and he opened a PayPal account. And he found 2,000 people who he knew were interested in betting on college football games. And he sent out an email to each one of them. He said, "Next Saturday, there's going to be a ball game between Team A and Team B. And I can tell you who's going to win it. I'm a mathematician. I figured out I can tell you who's going to win it." And so to 1,000 of them, he sent an email that predicted A was going to win. And to 1,000, he predicted that B was going to win. And of course, at the end of the week, when the ball game was finished, the 1,000 who got the right answer were really happy. Wow, this guy knows his stuff. Way to go. So they started sending emails saying, "Way to go, buddy. Great stuff." The other guys complained that he would lost. He says, "Well, you know, you win some, you lose some." So the next week, he took the 1,000 for whom he predicted the correct result, and he sent out a second email. There was 2 teams playing this week, C and D. And he sent us 500 emails predicting that C would win, and 500 emails predicting that D would win. At the end of the week, one of the 2 of them had won, and these guys wrote back and said, "This is amazing. You got 2 victories in a row. You're really onto something here. This is really cool." So the third week, he sent out an email, and now E and F are playing. And he sent out 500 emails, 250 predicting E, and 250 predicting F. And of course, one of the teams won. And now he really had them in the palm of his hand. The 250 who had gotten 3 wins in a row, they were really excited. They really thought this guy was God. So he says, "Okay, guys, no more freebies. Next week is going to cost you $100 each, but you can make a fortune in this." So he now sent out 250 emails, 125 predicting that G would win, and 125 predicting that H would win. But they charged him $100 each to make the prediction. So now he has $25,000 in his pocket. And at the end of the week, one of the teams win, and now they write back and say, this is awesome. 4 wins in a row. I mean, the statistical probability of this happening is astronomical. This guy is a total guru. And he says, absolutely. You can mortgage your houses, you can do anything you want. I'll give you the prediction for the next game, but it's going to cost you $1,000 each. And so they're dead happy at this stage. They've had 4 wins in a row. They've won a whole bunch of money, and now they cough up their $1,000. And he sends his prediction. And to some of them, he's going to send, H, and to some of them, I. But they're all going to pay $1,000. So he's now made $125,000 on this round and $25,000 on the round before. He now has $150,000, which he pockets, closes his website, closes down his PayPal account, and moves on. And then repeats the same thing someplace else. At the end of the year, he's got over $1 million in his pocket. So I'm not going to tell you who he is. But watch out for his emails. Now I want to talk about that today for a few minutes. Because in a sense, that is the story of biblical prophecy. And today we hear these dire predictions about the future, biblical prophecy. So I'm going to make 4 main points this morning. The first one I will call the crystal ball. Second one I will call failure to be present. Thirdly, I will talk about coming awake. And then fourthly, dismantling the edifice. So the first one, the crystal ball. It's been my experience and my theory that there are 4 ways of being a really good prognosticator, a really good foreteller of the future. The first way to really accurately foretell the future is to retroactively prognosticate. Parents do this all the time. I told you so. So you wait until the event has happened and then you predict it. And now you've got a 100% record, if you can manage to do this. If people are so gullible that they actually believe that you predicted ahead of time, they didn't remember you doing it, but you told them you did, and so they presume you did, now you've got a 100% track record. So that's one way. You retroactively prognosticate. The second scheme is to do your prognosticating in such generic terminology that no matter what the result is, you can spin the data to say, see, this is exactly what I said. So if you couch it well, you can predict. Astrologers do this all the time. I foresee that life has been difficult for you. And the future is going to be very different. And you're going to meet somebody who's going to be extraordinary in your life. How many of us haven't had that happen? All 3 happened to us. So if you couch it in such terminology, you can always spin the data subsequently and show that in fact you've been right. And then the third great way to prognosticate is to make so many prophecies that on the law of averages, at least one of them is going to prove correct. And then you keep harping on that one subsequently, and you ignore all the wrong ones and you harp on this. This is rather like betting on the horses. If you want to win on the horses, there's a very simple technique. You take a race and you put money on every single horse who's running, and you're bound to pick a winner. So if there are 30 horses running in the race and you put $10 in each one of them to win, you'll pick the winner. Now the winner comes in at 2-1, so you get $20. You expended $300, so you've lost $280, but you picked the winner. Now that's how sometimes prognostication is done. And so we think that prophecy, biblical prophecy, is about one of these techniques. We think, in fact, that Luke may have fallen into the first category today. Luke is predicting, it seems, the fall of Jerusalem. With hindsight, Luke is writing about 85 to 90 AD, and Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. So either with 15 or 20 years of hindsight, he's predicting what's going to happen. Now, of course, part of the problem is that there's a whole bunch of stuff conflated in Luke's account today in chapter 18. Because they've mixed up a whole bunch of stuff. The fall of Jerusalem, which happened in 70 AD, the death of Jesus, which happened about 30 AD, individual death, the end of the world, the second coming, they're all conflated. And so it's impossible to know what Luke was predicting and what Jesus was actually saying. But it seems he fell into the first category. He was predicting a post factum. And so what is the function of prophecy? It's none of these things. Prophecy is not about predicting the future. That's a total misunderstanding of what prophecy is about. The prophet is not the person who can foretell the future. The prophet is the one among us who can see the present really, really clearly. And I've illustrated that with an example in the past. I remember as a small child, when television first came to Ireland in the early 60s, there was a program called Edifice school television. And they would bring on some really good teachers in many disciplines, and they would have them demonstrate on TV, a lesson on TV. And this one day, a science teacher was demonstrating to a little class of 9 and 10-year-olds. And he had a very simple apparatus. He had a glass beaker, 3/4 full of water, and he had a pencil inside in it, stuck inside in it. And he brought in the little kids, and he said to them, sit down. And there's like 9 or 10-year-olds. They're bouncing around the place. And he said to them, what do you see? Sir. Michael, what do you see? Well, there's a glass beaker with water inside it, and there's a pencil inside it, and the pencil is bent. And he pulls out the pencil, and of course the pencil is dead straight. And he says, I want to teach you today about refraction. Water and air refract light differently. So it only appears to be bent, and it appears to be bent where the water meets the air, because light is being refracted differently by the air and by the water. So see, it's not bent. Now go out of the room, and I'll bring you back in a few minutes. And they go back out, and they come in 2 minutes, and apparently there's the same apparatus. And he says, okay, can you describe to me what you see right now? Sir. Mary, I see a glass beaker of water, and there's a pencil stuck inside in it, and it seems to be bent, but it's not bent. It's only because of the different refractive abilities of air and water, but it's really straight. And he pulls out the pencil, and the pencil is bent. He's cracked the pencil in the meantime and put it right down at the water level. Now, he was having fun with them. But what I got that day, I've never forgotten, that there are 3 kinds of people in our world. There are people who see what appears to be. That was the first group of kids. And then there are people who see what they're told is there. That was the second little girl. And then there are people who see what actually is. And we call these last group of people, we call them prophets. So the prophets are not the people who can prognosticate and foretell the future. They're the people who see the present really clearly, while the rest of us see what we're told is there or what appears to be present, but not what's actually there. Now, because the prophet can see very, very clearly what is, they can fairly accurately estimate where it's headed. If you see a particular trajectory and you see its past, you can fairly accurately predict where it's headed. But the function of prophecy never has been to predict the future. The prophet is the person who sees the present really clearly. And moreover, their job then, their function, is not to foretell the future, it is to call us back into alignment. Now in the past, what did this look like? The prophet in the past was the person who was calling back a chosen people into a covenanted relationship with a bunch of laws by a partisan God. That's what it looked like in the past. So the function of the prophet often in biblical times was to call back the children of Israel into a covenanted relationship with Yahweh, which involved keeping 613 precepts. That is long since passé. That is not the function of prophecy anymore. The function of prophecy is not to call a special people into a special relationship with a partisan God around a particular kind of agreement involving particular kinds of rules. That is not the function of prophecy anymore. The function of prophecy is to call all of God's children into alignment with Source. It is not about denominational affiliation. It is not about membership of a particular ethnic group. It is not about laws or covenants. It is about our basic realization and identification with our core essence. And so the entire function of the prophet is to call us back again and again into that kind of alignment and to remind us of the misidentification, that we are misidentifying with our egos or our personas or our group or our nation or our tribe or our denomination, and to call us back into the fullest alignment with our soul source. That's the function of the prophet. Which brings me to my second point then. Failure to be present. Of all the ways in which we misidentify, in my opinion, of all of the ways in which we misidentify persona for self, or ego for self, of all of the ways in which we mistake the God image inside for a tribal affiliation or denominational membership or being part of a nation or a group, of all the ways in which that happens, easily the most common way in my experience is that we fail to be present to the moment. And I'm going to give you a kind of a funny example or a funny illustration or metaphor to talk about this. Imagine you have an office and you've got a secretary in your office. And your filing cabinet consists of 3 different sets. You've got one filing cabinet dedicated to future projects. And you've got one filing cabinet dedicated to present projects that you're working on right now. And you've got one filing cabinet dedicated to past projects which are complete. And one day you come in with a very important document about a project you're working on right now, and you go over to the present filing cabinet and you go to put it in, and it's totally chock-a-block. Wow, that's weird. You call in the secretary and you say, Jim, where am I going to put this document? And he says, oh, you can't. I say, what do you mean you can't? Well, you know, it's full. The present place is full. And you look through it and he says, that's not stuff I'm working on right now. And he says, well, I made backup copies of the future stuff and the past stuff, because you have to back up copies. What if something happened to this filing cabinet or that? So it's full up with backup copies of the future and the present. So, it's weird. Okay? So you go out and you buy a new filing cabinet. And you dedicate it to the present projects you're working on. And tomorrow you come to file a very important document, and it's absolutely full. You think, Jim, get in here. What's happening? And Jim says, well, I keep reading about people who've lost all their documentation, so I made triplicates, and I filled up the present one. You say, okay. And you go down to Office Depot and you buy a 5th filing cabinet, and you come back and you put in position, and this is dedicated to the present projects you're working on. I declare to God, you come in tomorrow to put a document in there, and it's packed again. You say, Jim, this is ridiculous. And he said, no, 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 no. You can't have enough backup copies of future documents and past documents. And so at the end of the month, you've got an office full of filing cabinets, but you have no space ever for your present stuff. Now that's how most of us operate. Most of us continually fill up the filing cabinet of the present moment with backup copies of yesterday's stuff and tomorrow's stuff. So what does it look like? The future stuff is always about fear and anxiety, and the past stuff is always about guilt and fear. And so we got an office full of filing cabinets, every single one of which is filled up with backup copies of future anxieties and past mistakes. And there's no place for the present moment. And we managed to string together a lifetime consisting of a concatenation of present moments, each of which has been hijacked and filled with fear from the future and guilt or anger about the past. There's no place to put the present stuff. We're stuck. What should be there? There should be a filing cabinet dedicated to the present moment, and there should be 100 hanging folders in there. And 95 of those hanging folders should be filled with the minor miracles of every day. There's not a single day goes by in which you don't experience 95% of what you actually experience, what your sensorium feeds to you, I would call minor miracles. 95 of your hanging folders in the present day category should be filled with those. And there should be another 3 folders dedicated to the major miracles of the day, and there are major miracles every single day. And 2 of them should be filled with the difficult experiences of the day. 2 of them. And that will be an adequate representation of a person who is really fully awake. We live in a world of extraordinary beauty. We live in a country with all our difficulties, where we have freedoms. Our bodies work pretty well. 95% of our experiences, minor miracles. 3% more is major miracles, and 2% is trauma. But those of us who even have managed to keep a filing cabinet for the present projects, you look into it, and 100%, 100 of the hanging folders are dedicated to the 2 traumas that happened today. Because we made 50 backup copies of each of them. Just to be sure that we didn't forget, because we must be aware of what's happening. And so even those of us who managed to create at least one filing cabinet dedicated to the present moment have filled it up with carbon copies of the 2 bad things that happened to me today. And we wonder then why we're not enlightened, or we wonder why we're worried, or why life sucks. Which brings me to my 3rd point, coming awake. 100% of human suffering lies in the gap between the ego and the soul. 100% of all human suffering lies in the gap between the ego and the soul. Because there's a double hijack that happens constantly. The ego hijacks the mind, and the mind hijacks the soul. And so the soul is brutalized, and the ego becomes the CEO. And the ego is always concerned with anxiety and with fear and with guilt and with frustration. There's this double hijack that happens. Now, every single one of us, occasionally, we will have experiences in which for the moment we manage to disidentify with the ego and to re-identify with soul. We have ecstatic moments. Every single one of us have occasional ecstatic moments. What differentiates us who are having these occasional ecstatic moments of bliss or unity consciousness is that a person who's moving towards enlightenment has regular moments like that. Regular moments in which he can disidentify with ego or with tribe or with nation or with denomination and re-identify with source energy, with Godhead, with unity consciousness, whatever word you want to give to it. The person who's moving towards enlightenment is having those experiences more and more regularly because he's working at it. And the avatar is the person who lives constantly in that space. The avatar, the Jesus figures, the Buddha figures, the Lao Tzu figures, are the people who manage to reach a stage of life where they're living 100% of the time in that realization, which does not mean that they're not able to function in the world. They are, but they bring that true identity into the world with them. So what does it look like to move into that kind of realization? What does it mean to come awake at that level? Because that is what every single one of us is called to. There are a few simple baby steps to that process. And the first one is this. The first one is the realization that we are spirits in spacesuits. It is the realization that although we're incarnated entities, we are souls who are incarnated. That our true essence and our ultimate identity is that we're bite-sized pieces of God. We're souls on safari on planet Earth. If we don't have that realization, then we tend to identify with the spacesuit. But we are not spacesuits. We are spirits in spacesuits. The spacesuit is a resource for incarnation. It does not define incarnation. It is not our identity. That's the first realization. The second one is this. We have volunteered for mission on planet Earth. There is nobody on the planet today, not one of the 6.5 billion of us on planet Earth today, who didn't freely say to God, send me, I will go. We are here by choice. We have come to do something phenomenal. We have come to bring peace in our times. We've come to create a quantum shift in human consciousness. Every one of us has come to do that. And so step 3 then is, I have to be able to identify not with the spacesuit, not with physicality, not with incarnation. I have to identify with the God within myself. Step 4 is, I have to be able to identify with the God inside you and all others. And then step 5 is, I have to identify with the God in all sentient beings. And now I can begin, having recognized the God in myself and in you and in all that is, I can begin to relate to that. The God in me relates to the God in you. Or as Hinduism will say, Namaste. The divine in me recognizes and honors the divine in you. Now it is God relating to God. These are the baby steps on the journey of coming to wakefulness. Which brings me to my 4th point. The disassembling of the edifice. That's what I mean by that. There's really difficult reading from Luke's Gospel today, in which Jesus at one stage says, pointing to this magnificent temple, which had been built around 930 BC, destroyed in the year 598 BC, and rebuilt around 515 BC. So it's about 600 years old at the time Jesus is looking at it. And people are boasting about what a magnificent edifice it is. And Jesus says, you see this building? The time will come when not a single stone will be left upon another stone. Now, what is he talking about here? In John's Gospel in chapter 4, he says the very same thing in a different kind of a context. In John chapter 4, he's having an encounter with a Samaritan woman on Mount Gerizim, which was another mountain in Samaria on which the Samaritans believed that this was the holy mountain. And this woman is talking to Jesus Christ, and she says, you know, our people say that this is where we should worship. You people say it's on Mount Zion. Who's telling the truth? And Jesus says very famously in John chapter 4, he says, the days are coming when people will neither worship on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. In fact, the hour is coming and is here absolutely right now, in which true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. God is spirit, and those who worship God will worship in spirit and in truth. What is he talking about? I've said to you many times that my definition of truth is the following. For me, truth is that which transforms and aligns me with source. It has nothing got to do with facts. It has got nothing got to do with maps of reality. Truth is that which aligns me, transforms me, and aligns me with source. And ultimate truth is that which transforms me radically and aligns me permanently with source. And so that is the truth there. So when Christ says true worship will happen in spirit and in truth, that is what he means as far as I'm concerned. It is the truth that is not about worshipping in particular locations, particular kinds of liturgies, or particular kinds of laws. It is about what brings us into, what transforms us and brings us into alignment with source. Now when you look at the history of buildings, Christ is talking about a particular edifice which is going to be dismantled. When you look at the history of it, you look at one of the first things human beings try to imitate from their understanding of the gods. Once we had our first transcendent experiences, or our first numinous experiences, and we began to try to understand what the life of the gods was like and to imitate them, one of the first things we did was to try to recreate on earth the dwelling places of the gods. And so when you look at the evolution of sacredness, it starts in sacred places. They believed that God was present in particular locations in very, very powerful ways. Not in other locations, but in some specific locations. Then it moved into God-occupied particular buildings, temples, ziggurats, synagogues, churches. So it moves into specific buildings. Then it's about God has a special place in particular peoples, whether it's the Jews or the Christians or the Muslims or the Zoroastrians, whichever group they think, God is present to us in a very particular way. And then it becomes God is present to a particular organization in very powerful ways, whether it's the Catholic Church or whether it's Hinduism, that there are religions that believe that God is present very powerfully to them. That is the trajectory. That was fine for people who lived 10,000 and 5,000 and 3,000 years ago. Unless we move to stage 5, the realization that God lives at the core of our being, then we are destined to watch what Jesus predicted, the dismantling of the edifice. We will live to see a time when not a stone will be left upon a stone. And I'm not just talking about physical structures, I'm talking about organizations and religion itself. But we can have it. There is no reason why we cannot continue to be in special places where there is extraordinary energy. In my language we call them choil oithana, thin places. Places in which the membrane separating the mystical from the mundane is temporarily diaphanous. There is no reason why we can't continue to experience that. There is absolutely no reason why we can't continue to experience God in sacred buildings, which have been impregnated with hundreds of years of the piety and the spiritual mysticism of generations of our forebears. There's no reason why we can't continue to do that. There's no reason why God can't still be found in communities, particularly communities that are dedicated to social justice and peace in our times. And there is no reason why God can't continue to be found in religious liturgy, numinous experiences, transcendent experiences. But they will only happen. They will only continue to happen if we have the courage to take the next step, to really experience God within, to experience the God within myself, the God within you, the God within my enemy, the God within all sentient beings. Unless we can move to that 5th step, the other steps will disintegrate. The Spirit of God, the Spirit of evolution is inexorably moving forward. And if we fail to move with it, then it will dismantle the sacred places, and it will raise the sacred temples, and it will fragment the communities, and it will dissolve the religions. But if we have the courage to make that step, we can have all of it. Jesus said very famously at one stage, those who have will be given more. Those who have nothing will lose even what they think they have. And I want to finish by putting that in a more modern articulation. I would predict that the entire clarion call of Spirit at the beginning of the 21st century is the following. Spirit is saying to us, you can have all of it, or you can have none of it, but you're not allowed to have just some of it.